A line from this book, Risk, written by General Stanley McChrystal, caught my attention. So I want to read an excerpt from the book before I start talking further. Effectively dealing with risk is not relying on a novice gambler's luck and the next turn of a card, nor is it covering your ears as you walk through a minefield in the hopes that if you don't hear the boom, then it won't eviscerate you. What is the kind of minefield that society is walking in today? Well, there are many people, like the masses, that generally close their ears and hope that nothing will happen. But there are very few people. Of course, there are people who clearly understand the risks, and the risks are in different dimensions. We make certain assumptions, such as if it's if shit hits the fan, it's anyways going to hit the fan. What can I do about it? That's one of the silos that people get into while thinking, and it's a dumb approach. Uh, Always trying to learn about the risks and avoiding them is an intelligent way, be it for organizations or be it for society and the life we live in as individuals. So, what is the cause for concern? What's the risk? Well, and what are the solutions that people are trying to come up with? So, the risks are many. If I have to mention a few of them, like everybody has heard of climate change, and the problem with discussions on climate change is that most of the discussions stop at 2100. 2100 is not some magical number where the earth suddenly stops warming or the impact to ecosystems are suddenly gone from there on, and it's not a perfect reset, but it's just a reference point. Whatever impacts there are on sea level rise or extinction or heating of the planet, this will continue far into the future. um, it's short-sightedness to not think about what happens after 2100. 2100 is only 75 years from now, and 75 years should be three generations. uh, every tribe or ancient community had some thought flow about some kind of concern about how their offsprings would survive in the future. Even the seven generation principle was in place in many tribes. Like if something has worked for seven generations, only then it'll be adopted into the wider society. So there have been so many precautions like that, but our current um, consumption patterns or emission patterns, the way we are meddling with climate and ecosystems, do not have that historical reference. We started seriously meddling around 150 years ago, and it was adopted into the broader society very quickly. We did not have seven generations of proof as to whatever technologies we were using and what impacts they might have. I can also say that wars have had a very serious influence on the technologies of modern day, be it from the semiconductor chips used in electronic devices, the radio, signal transmission. There is a lot of technology that sprung up from the world wars, and we do not have seven generations of proof as to what this technology would do or how it's not adverse to human health. That's a risk we live with on a daily basis. I've mentioned two, that's climate, and the other is the rapidly advancing technology. Then comes the ecosystems. the Earth has a particular potential to rejuvenate itself. So, if you look at their assessments, there have been multiple assessments by scientists telling that we are consuming what 1.75 Earths can rejuvenate, which means we are not consuming just what was rejuvenated, but it's like consuming the principle, not just the interest. So that creates an impact on ecosystems. We are having many direct and indirect impacts. Direct impacts used to be hunting, and land clearance. Indirect impacts are like from the nitrogen fertilizers we use in agriculture, which run off into streams and then eventually into seas and kill wildlife there, or meddle with the wildlife in some or another way. These are indirect impacts. So we have uh, our fingerprint is very strong right now on the Earth's ecosystem. And it's well known among the scientists that we are in the middle of the sixth mass extinction, looking at the current ecosystems from a paleontological standpoint, looking at evidence of how extinctions have happened in the past, how many have happened, and when there is a clear demarcation uh, between different layers of sand, where for a particular period you don't see any fossils at all. That is an indicator of extinction, and very few animals and plants survived that phase. This is the sixth one. Then comes toxification. Toxification, we use all sorts of chemicals, from plastics to, there are 200,000 odd chemicals that are being manufactured and used without knowing the second order and third order effects of these. They have interactions between them, these chemicals, and they also have, um, in, say, impact on life on Earth. We cannot have graduate students pick every molecule of DDT that is spread from the peak of Mount Everest to the depths of the ocean. This will continue to stay. Of course, there has been some promising research about um, fungus that eats plastic, but it's still in pilot stages. We can only wish them the best, and we cannot rely on those technologies to solve the plastic problem. And you must have heard of the Pacific Ocean garbage patch, which is an island in itself. So the kinds of chemicals that we've released, from atrazine to bisphenols, each of them has an impact, and most of them do not have a positive impact. And if you didn't know, then you should know that in India, Hyderabad is a place where maximum generic drugs are manufactured, and the sewage that seeps into the river from areas where generic drugs are manufactured uh, are breeding grounds for extensively drug resistant bacteria and PDR. This has become a hot topic in recent days because antibiotics do not seem to be working for many people. How does that happen? It's simple evolution. Bacteria evolve at a much faster pace, and once you have already exposed the antibiotic to the bacteria, then they will start developing defenses, and sooner or later, that particular antibiotic will stop working. And that was about toxification. The economics we have, crony capitalism, um, nepotistic mindsets, Uh, Very few people have the incentive to think about the society at large. There is very little incentive for somebody who thinks for the good of society at large. But there's a lot of incentive to think about personal profits and personal betterment. The whole economic system is based upon the idea that every man is selfish, and if given a chance, he will try to get the most for himself. That's a false assumption. All human beings are not like that, but we have considered that as a dominant narrative. And moreover, our currencies are not backed by anything solid. They're called fiat currencies. That's just paper. Uh, Nothing of value can be actually exchanged. There was a time till 1970 when the US dollar was backed by gold reserves, but uh, since then, the world of trade happens with the US dollar, and US dollar itself is not backed by gold. So we are in a very speculative economic system too. There are a lot of risks, right from recessions that pose small scale risks to deleveraging um, and $1 trillion deficits. Well, that was a hint about economics. Then, when it comes to consumption, consumption is encouraged because that's how the GDP of a country grows. People are encouraged to spend. Whatever they spend is to purchase a commodity or to gain a favor, or there's resources involved in all of this. Even if I'm getting say a solar panel, and there's a lot of resources that goes into making the solar panel. Even the batteries could need lithium, which is a very rare element, and the copper. um, Earlier I've seen photos where when the British first went to the Americas, I've seen them sitting on a huge copper nugget. That's pure copper. And today we are searching for bits and pieces, um, millimeter to micron size pieces of copper scattered over vast areas. And we're doing very invasive, our modern methods of extraction have become more and more invasive. And you also know about peak oil. That's about consumption. Of course, this alone could take up a lot of time. And I just want to give you an overall picture of the risk involved. Then comes ethics. Um, when I talk about ethics, we have to look at not what modern law says. Of course, the law today was written by people 80 to 100 years ago, but that's not what human nature is. Not necessarily. There are so many things in human nature that differ from our modern law. Egalitarianism and our behavior being somewhere between a chimpanzee and a pygmy chimpanzee or a bonobo. Uh, what marriage was and is. Um, uh, what should be considered education and what should not be, the importance of a teacher, um, the importance of culture over time, all that a man knows, or for that matter, any animal, um, transfers, imparts to its younger ones, other than the genetic information, is culture. So it's almost everything that we know. In India, culture culturally there were many arts and technologies that people knew, which was systematically disrupted, and people were not allowed to pursue their traditional techniques. This happened during the colonial rule, and not just that, for quite a long time the culture has been degrading, and you can look up to epic prophecies like the ones made for how the Kali Yuga will proceed, and then you can look back at the society today. You will see a lot of um, similarities. A lot of things will fall in line. Then the next thing I want to talk about is solutions. Of course, for each of these problems, there is research happening, and people are trying hard to come up with solutions. And I would only want people to have one thing in mind while looking for a solution. We have a tradition in the modern science of letting go of all the parameters, keeping the parameters fixed, like in in any physics equation you would let go of multiple parameters. Even if I say way force is mass into acceleration, then the acceleration, the mass is kept constant and the acceleration changes, then what happens to force? This is the kind of experiments we do. Like, some of the parameters are fixed as constant and only the other parameters are varied, but in real world that's not how anything works, because all the parameters will continue to exert an influence from the beginning to the end. So even the solutions that we come up with, like using solar panels for electricity, solar panel manufacture is great. Yeah, you're trying to use renewable energy from the sun, but mm, there are so many other factors that people don't consider, like the amount of fossil fuel that goes into manufacturing these panels, and the amount of extraction that has to happen for batteries, storage technology, and for panels, and for transmission lines. There is a lot. There are a lot of dependencies that are not taken into consideration. Um, there are other technologies where you try to block the sun's rays using aerosols. But what could the resulting toxification be for the planet? How could agriculture get poisoned based on the aerosols? There's very little collateral being thought about, and there are few people who think about the collaterals while they come up with new technologies. And we have to encourage those people who have thought about the collaterals when something is pursued, when any solution is picked up. And we let's dive deeper in the videos that I make later, and we'll try to understand what risks exist and how we could probably overcome them. And in certain cases, we can definitely overcome them. And the solutions that I want to propose are not going to be those on a societal scale. We cannot get the masses to agree on certain things, like giving up their standards of living and consuming less, convincing them that less is better. It's quite hard, not an impossible job, I believe, but still, the possibility is very marginal that you convince the broader population on the planet to uh, use lesser of the resources, uh, earn lesser, spend lesser, because that's the way we have to go. That's just one of the ways. There are so many other things that underline our culture, underline our spiritual orientations, and suggest us to look within ourselves and not always come up with solutions that are objective. There are many solutions subjective too, and let's hope for the best.